Welcome back. I am John P. Today we are going to be talking about 4 of the last best value watches in the market today. If you collect watches and you watch a lot of watch YouTube, or you read watch blogs, or you engage in any other kinds of watch content and entertainment, then you know that watches are today priced and selling at all-time highs. It's without question that the demand has never been higher due to things like the increased amount of people that have been pulled into the watch collecting community and a whole multitude of additional factors that we know what's going on in the world. Because of these things, watches have reached all-time highs in terms of pricing. But if you hunt around and you do look outside the norms of the blue chip brands like the Rolexes, the Patek Philippe's, Vacherons, Audemars Piguet, if you get outside of those brands, as well as the hot models, the Submariners, the Daytonas, the Royal Oaks, the overseas in terms of the Vacherons, if we get away from that, we can find some really great values still left standing that for the right collector that's willing, once again, to go off that beaten path, it can be a really great watch to have in your collection. And with the way that the watch market is going, these may also be potentially watches that do have upside for increase in value, but that's not the way we're going to look at it. We are going to look at it as watches that deliver the same kind of quality as their counterparts in more popular brands, but things can change, and these could also cross over that threshold like we've seen with so many other brands and models within the last 2 years. But guys, before we do that, please do not forget to check out delraywatch.com, where we buy, sell, and trade watches. I don't know that we have any of these watches that I'm about to talk to you about on the list, but we have so many other watches in stock for you to check out at delraywatch.com. On the wrist today, I have a vintage Le Culture Value 72 driven chronograph that you can see more of on my Instagram, The Real John P, as well as what goes on behind the scenes at Delray Watch, including my personal life. So check me out on Instagram, The Real John P. So without further ado, what is the first best value, last remaining value in watches today? I would say this is going to be a Brigade Classique. Now, the Brigade Classique line does still stand today, right? The Brigade Classique is the quintessential dress watch from the Swatch Group. It's their pinnacle of watches that they consider the creme de la creme for the Swatch Group, the holding company that also owns brands such as Omega. And this is one of their highest end brands that offers not only some of the highest quality case construction in the industry, but also the prestige of having an old world brand. With brands like Patek Philippe and Vacheron and Audemars Piguet, we're talking about brands that are centuries old. In the case of Brigade, we're talking about a brand or a company that was founded in the 1700s, right? Think of what companies exist today that are relevant that were founded in the 1700s. There are many that exist, but certainly there are more that are relevant today that have been built within the last 10, 20 years than the 1700s, right? So that alone adds so much interesting value to the watch brand in and of itself. But the interesting thing about Brigade is they haven't quite released any watches that are modern enough to captivate the modern collector and really put them on the map in that kind of a way. And so what you see is these very high quality watches that are quintessential dress watches selling for fractions of the retail price. And if you are willing to go in their back catalog, like the Brigade Classique that I have, my Tiffany retailed and signed Brigade Classique watch, smaller size, don't get me wrong there, but that is what the brand kind of offers in terms of dress watches, and that has been historically what a dress watch is. If you go in the back catalog, you can pick up these watches for a third, a fourth of what these watches would be selling for from a brand like Patek Philippe or a Vacheron in many cases. And let's not forget that Brigade did invent so many things like the automatic winding watch movement, as well as the Brigade numerals. When you look at a watch that has that very interesting style numeral, that's very attractive and romantic to most people, I would say, that's known from the brand Brigade, right? It's in the name in and of itself. So when you look at a watch like this, I love it. I think Brigade only has room to grow and offers some of the best values in watches. But make sure that you do buy pre-owned, because as the Swatch Group's pinnacle of watchmaking, this brand does have a high retail price, but on the market, they can be had at a much better pre-owned price. Now that takes us into another brand that has been doing a lot of great things, but this particular model, for whatever reason, is still an amazing value, and I would recommend jumping on this one. This is a favorite of mine from the brand. This is a Zenith El Primero triple calendar moon phase. Now Zenith made a couple of slight variations of this, different dial colorways, as well as it came on a bracelet, and a couple of other subtle differences, as well as a bit of a font change through this period of time with Zenith when they were restructuring. But what is so amazing about this particular watch is not only the construction, not only that iconic El Primero movement modified with this triple calendar moon phase complication functionality, is that a modern version of this watch from Zenith themselves sells for $11,000. And when you look at a brand in that same tier group offering the same complications, a triple calendar chronograph with a moon phase, JLC, Jagrilla Culture, is offering one of these models at almost $16,000 US. And let's not even talk about other brands out there that are offering these things in stainless steel at $20,000, $30,000 plus. Now, when we look at something like this, go ahead, guess. What do we think that this is trading for out of the market without going to Chrono24 or eBay or any of the other places? These can be had for about $3,500 US. You have to shop around, maybe buy outside of the US, but that's not a problem for a lot of people, including the viewers outside of the US. $3,500 for a watch that in current catalog today from Zenith, a comparable model, is selling for $11,000 retail price. I think that's an amazing buy. You get that heritage, the history, you have the El Primero movement, the complications, a little bit smaller on the size compared to the watches they're producing today. But if you like that, and that's your niche, that's what you want to put on your wrist, that's your wrist size, this is an amazing buy. And I really do think that these will continue to increase in popularity and probably start drying up soon as more watch collectors catch on. Now, next, this one is going to be a bit polarizing, especially for long-standing, long-term watch collectors. And I'll tell you why. This is going to be a late 90s to early 2000s era Breitling Chronomat chronograph. Now, many of you out there are going to remember when Breitling had a very difficult time selling watches. There was a lot of dumping coming from the brand, and that means when the brand pushes inventory out there through different methods, different rogues, if you will, that essentially shop around excess inventory from the brands, and they would sell them without warranty cards. They'd end up on the gray market, and that hurt so many brands. But probably the brand that strategy hurt the most was Breitling. And so that's why when they sold out to a private equity company, there was a lot of restructuring, there was pulling back of the inventory, the dumping stopped with the new models, they limited production, and they increased the value of their brand. You see it today. They have some very hot models that people love, and they're making more of what people want, and at smaller volume to retain the value of the watches and prevent that scenario from happening again. But the interesting thing, particularly with these chronomats, is they're starting to become vintage now, and the prices haven't really gone up to keep up with the rest of the market. And the demand also hasn't quite gotten there yet because it's in this transitional period between vintage, where the lower quality of the components is par for the course, and it's kind of a nostalgic thing, right? Older watches don't have the new technology, but it's not quite the new technology where you may feel comfortable swimming and playing sports or doing anything too active with these watches. And so as time beats on and we continue to see these watches turn more from transitional into vintage, some of these interesting colorways, like we've even had at Delray Watch, some of the panda dials, reverse pandas, interesting ways the dials have aged, collaborations with different aerospace outfits and air forces and military from around the world. These watches are going to start becoming collectible, and people will be able to look past the fact that oftentimes Breitling would put in stock movements, even sometimes with unsigned rotors. So right now, you can get one of these between $1,500 to $2,500 US, depending on condition, so many other factors, but I think these are a great buy for someone in that range looking for something maybe interesting and quirky. Now, lastly, this one's also going to be polarizing for those that have been collecting for a while, and I'm even scratching my head a little bit, and I'll explain why. This is going to be Frank Muller, and this is probably, I would recommend, a salmon dial Casablanca. And this is interesting, right? If you've been around for a while, you know that Franck Muller also had a very difficult stretch of time. I mean, let's talk probably the last 10 years. Franck Muller went through some changes. They kind of copied the Hublot strategy with their Vanguard line. Then they kind of went Richard Mille and tried to jump on that bandwagon. And it was interesting when it came out, but these watches didn't really sell. They ended up in the gray market at truly pennies on the dollar. But now they've gone back into more that traditional spirit of the Franck Muller watches, which is a little bit more classic, a little more dress watches. Let's forget the master of complications kind of moniker that they would, or slogan that they would use, because, you know, most of their watches they do sell are really not complicated at all. But I digress. What we see here is this kind of interesting piece of time where these watches were just so hot, then they became irrelevant because they overproduced, a lot like what happened with Breitling. But the reality is the watches were not of bad quality, right? They featured the same types of movements that everyone else was using, right? The ETA movements. They featured the same type of case construction with the watches of their price points up to $10,000. A lot of the dials were in these very handsome colorways. Think the salmon dials. The bracelets were more than sufficient. They're good watches for all purposes and utility value. The only downside was the branding and the overproduction and the lack of consistent cataloging with the models. And so what you see now is you can get a Franck Muller with a salmon dial, a gentleman's size watch, even maybe on a bracelet for under $3,000, maybe even getting closer to the $2,300 on Chrono 24, make a lower offer. I bet the dealer will be inclined to accept, and you have yourself a watch that may not be the most popular in terms of branding, but is on par with a lot of what you'd be getting for many times the price from other brands today, retail price. And I think if you ever had that soft spot for the Franck Muller, but never could pull the trigger for any number of reasons, now would probably be the time to do so, because Franck Muller may actually be successful with their kind of reinvigorating of their brand. And maybe with the way the watch market is, they will be successful once again, limit the supply, and have a really hot brand once again. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, but it could happen. And with the watch market today, that's the interesting thing, right? We're in a spot where we are scraping for good values in watches. But I feel like here with these four watches, if you're in the market for any of these kind of four watches, they fit the bill of what you're looking for. They're all really great buys. And I think now would be a pretty good time to do so if they do fit your criteria. But what do you guys think? Are there any other watches that you think are still a great buy, or maybe they're a newly created great buy, like with what's happening with the Franck Muller watches? I would love to see it and hear it in the comments below. Also, please do not forget to check out delraywatch.com, where we buy, sell, trade watches, as well as my Instagram, The Real John P. Thanks, guys. You've been chatting with John P.